Right. So my name is Olasunkanmi, and I'm a doctoral student at University of Fortes in South Africa. And I'm here to present some of the initial analysis that informed some of my research on indigenous knowledge system and participatory justice in Operation Fakisa, South Africa's blue economy. So Operation Fakisa here is South Africa's blue economy, and it's as you probably see, the idea here is to check it vis-a-vis global discourse. How well is Operation Fakisa representing? How well does it, represent the rest of the world? How well does it mirror the requirements laid by global frameworks around the world? All right. So, understanding something about the blue economy is the fact that blue economy is ocean economy. Everything that has to do with every economic activities that has to do with the ocean. And as you probably already know, I'm not an indigenous researcher, so it's very, very important that I also acknowledge the First Nations who own the land of which I'm presenting, and before I jump into it. So for we in sociology, we do not see the ocean as as water. We see it as a place of contested power. We see that things have moved away from the ocean has moved away from the commons where everybody had access to it, where every nation where it was open for global trade and commerce, to one that is controlled. So we've seen the world move from commons to the green economy to the blue, and now to the blue economy. So to give you a sense of what the blue economy is about, it is the ocean-based economy. It is anchored on SDG 14, life below water. Then it has the principle of ecological sustainability, that is, and then it also have the principle of social inclusion. And this is where indigenous knowledge system comes into it, and also in the indigenous people, coastal communities and the indigenous people, because how do we achieve social inclusion if we exclude the very people who suffer the most as a result of the blue economy, as a result of our expansion into the sea? These people have always been with the sea. They've known the sea way before we got there, and they managed the sea. How else can we achieve conservation better than the people who have been able to use the sea for thousands of years before we got there? And we find ourselves in a place where we are teaching these people how to use the ocean. We are telling them, oh, this is how you conserve the resources of the ocean. Meanwhile, these people have been conserving it for thousands of years, and that is why we met the ocean. And to give you a clear picture of what Operation Fakisa is, Operation Fakisa, like I've said, is South Africa's blue economy. It means big, the word Fakisa there means Oriop. It's a South African language. It means Oriop. It means to be fast. And all of this, gives us the picture of the blue economy that is growth accelerated, that is based on the principle of capitalism, that is based on the principles of exclusion, because capitalism is about division, the haves and the have not. So all of these things, so the way South Africa has been able to, approach the blue economy is from the principles of capitalism, and it's also from the principles of exclusion. So in order to evaluate, so the idea here is to evaluate Operation Fakisa and see how it relates to this blue economy, these blue economy principles as laid down by United Nations, by the Association of Southeast Asian Countries, by the African Union, by the Pacific Island, by the European Union. So in my analysis, I engaged a methodology called heuristic evaluation. Heuristic evaluation is a method that's been used in human-computer interaction for years, and it's a method where you compare. It's usually used in human-computer interaction, as I've said. You compare computer software against laid down principles, and this method has been applied to policy analysis. Then I attempted the comparative framework of these global economic principles. And then these are the things I found. I found that the global economic blue economic, so the global blue economic principle, they call for the following They call for the following touch points as the basis of the blue economy: participatory governance, that is the extent of inclusive decision making, and the most important set of people here, the indigenous people, the coastal communities; epistemic pluralism, the ability of any blue economic principle or any blue economic framework or national adaptation of blue economic framework to respect the different ways of knowing and being that is within their community or that is within their country. Actually, social and ecological justice, the ability of any blue economic framework to also distribute the benefit and minimize the harm and distribute the benefit such that the people who face the most harm are the one who benefits the most. And economic sustainability, long-term viability, and intergenerational equity. That means ability to use the ocean in a way that we are not the only ones that will use it. Hundreds of years from now, the ocean will be transferred. We are able to, we are taking accounts for the future generations. And after I evaluated Operation Pakistan against this framework that I've highlighted from my heuristic evaluation, we found that they lack participatory governance, and even when they involved indigenous communities, it was tokenistic. So Operation Fakisa adds about 6 work streams that they call lab, where they had different stakeholders to touch on different points or different touch points within the blue economic principles. But in all of these things, there was no representation of the indigenous community who owned the ocean. And this conversation is even important, it's even hilarious, because I was talking to a fellow doctoral colleague, and I was telling him about my research, and I said, oh, I'm interested in studying coastal communities and their relationship with the ocean. And then he asked that, who are coastal communities? I said, yeah, the people who live by the ocean, the people who own the ocean. He said, but they don't exist. I said, what do you mean? What do you mean that these people don't exist? Then they said, oh, maybe they exist like they don't exist. I said, no, this is high time for us to center their voices in ocean governance and in modern day principle. And so the government has also approached these coastal communities in a way that they exist like they don't exist. They are invisible to the government. And it's so obvious in the way they designed the Operation Pakistan, the way South Africa has designed their Operation Pakistan. They excluded the small-scale coastal communities and they sacked them from the marine resources. So they had this policy called small-scale fisheries that limits the number of fishes you're able to get from the ocean, that limits the number of fishes you're able to get from the ocean. It limits the times you are supposed to fish. And all of these conservation practices are not new to the indigenous community. In fact, there's an indigenous community there's a coastal community in South Africa where they have this sustainability principle that when you pick a fish that is smaller than your hand, you have to return it to the ocean. When you catch a fish that is smaller than you have to return it to the ocean. So all of these principles are already there, and there's no need to limit them in conservation practices. Then we also realized that Operation Fakisa is still far away from achieving social and ecological, justice, as I've been explaining in participatory governance. Then we find that there's a technocratic bias. Technocratic bias here means that the indigenous knowledge system, like the Amaxhosa, Amazulu, and the Khoisan set of people, and the Khoisan knowledge system, are not accounted for in Operation Fakisa in any way. And all of these principles are against, global principles like the Pacific Blue Nations and the African Union Blue Economic Framework that already states that the indigenous knowledge ways of knowing the ocean is one of the key principles of the blue economy. Then we also found that Operation Fakisa is extractivist and it is short term. Short term in the sense that it prioritizes immediate results. It is based on Malaysia's big fast result methodology, a principle, a framework that prioritizes immediate result, short-term result in any way possible. It prioritizes results over quality, quantity over quality. And all of these things are inconsistent with indigenous knowledge systems and indigenous ways of management. So this extractivist orientation, where they only look after getting and not replacing. And all of these things, all of these things are embedded into the indigenous knowledge system where you don't only take, you return. Regeneration principles, regenerative principles are embedded into indigenous knowledge system. And all of these things are things that Operation Fakisa does not account for. They only take without planning to return. So, and they also overlook intergenerational responsibility. Intergenerational responsibility, yeah, it means that they don't care about what happens in 100 years from now. They really care about getting jobs, building a global economy, and making South Africa one of the greatest economies on earth. At the end, we concluded that currently, Operation Fakisa, South Africa's blue economy, exhibits traces of brown economy more than blue economy. Brown economy in the sense that it is still very extractivist, it is still exclusive, and it recreates apartheid era exclusionary practices. And then we argue that if we were to proceed, if we were to recommend ways to transform Operation Fakisa from brown economy to blue economy, we need to find ways to integrate indigenous knowledge system, to actively integrate indigenous knowledge system into the policy and the management practices of the blue economy. We also need to find ways to achieve co-governance. We also need to find ways to achieve transdisciplinary knowledge production. Transdisciplinary knowledge production here means that getting different knowledge systems together and having them collaborate. So it is on the basis of trying to transform Operation Fakisa from brown economy to blue economy that informed my doctoral thesis that we'll be looking at. That informed my doctoral thesis that we'll be looking at how do we achieve participatory justice in South African ocean economy? How do we achieve, what elements of indigenous knowledge system can inform ocean governance in South Africa? And what are the areas of convergence and divergence between indigenous knowledge system and Operation Fakisa? I believe that if we are able to find the areas where they converge and where they diverge, we'll be able to design an inclusive ocean governance system that not only takes from the ocean, but accounts for every epistemic system and but accounts for the entire knowledge base that can be found in South Africa. That way, South Africa will be able to achieve the blue economy that it ought to achieve and remain in line with the global blue economy discourse. So these are my references, and I leave you with one question. What indigenous knowledge system or what indigenous wisdom can guide ocean economy in Australia and wherever you find yourself? I'll be answering that question in South Africa, and I'll be happy to share my results when they are finally out. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I love that you finished with a question to puzzle us all and think about it. Thank you so much. Do we have any questions from the audience? Thank you so much.